Today we're looking at the Spiritforged expansion with the body cards, and there are some bangers in it. As always, I rate the cards from 1 to 6 stars, but in body we have a very big gap. There's a lot of cards that are trash, but there's a lot of cards that are really awesome. So it's gonna be an interesting color. Remember, this is all done without actually playing with the cards yet, so this is like a very, maybe wrong, first impression, but that makes it more entertaining. All right, let's go. Alright, first is gonna be Bukhur Captain, a free drop with 1 power cost and 3 might that you can draw 1 or buff me, so it has synergy with set, like you can instantly have a unit that is buffed, which is an upside, right? When it comes to other body decks, that depends now on what you play. In many decks you would just rather draw a card, like to just keep going if you're specifically also in like the later stages of the game. So the modality is nice, so I don't think this card is like super powerful or anything. I'm giving it just 3 stars. It's okay-ish. But the problem is I just heavily dislike free drops in this game for some reason that have a power cost, because they just don't fit the curve. And if you go first, you don't want to play this as a 1 drop. And also, like, how many free drops can you have in your deck when in body? If you play like an aggressive mid-range deck, probably that free drop that readies your unit, the Bilgewater, can't remember the name, but the one that is played instead, of course, I feel like it's just more useful than this one overall. But yeah, we'll see. Next one, we have a 5 drop with 5 might, Combat Chef, that has a Weapon Master. So it's not terrible. It's on rate when it comes to 5 drops, and you're able to instantly equip it equipment that you played in one of the previous turns. So for example, if you're going second, you can have a free drop gear that, if not answered, you have already equipped for your next turn, which is pretty strong. So I'm giving it 3 because it all depends how often we'll be actually playing equipment on turn 1. And when you're going first, like on the play, I think it's much harder to actually fit this in. So the fact that it kind of depends on which way you were going here makes it a little bit more awkward. If it would had a possibility of accelerating that, that's a different story. But anyway, 3 stars. That's it. It's okay. Dauntless Vanguard is a 4 drop with 1 power cost and 4 might. Its text says you may play me to an occupied enemy battlefield. So it's kind of like a weird accelerate. It doesn't actually accelerate because you can't go to the battlefield you want to, right? You can only play it on the battlefield that has an enemy, so it's limited in its options. But at the same time, we know the cost of accelerate. Accelerate is 1 mana and 1 power cost. So we can think about it like this Dauntless Vanguard is a little bit better than the rate that it typically would have, right? For that option of playing it on an occupied battlefield. Now, I don't think it's a great card. We can compare it a little bit to the reversed option from the purple coral, where it's a 3 drop with 2 might that can be played on an open battlefield, right? And that one is probably way easier to squeeze in into a deck than this one. So I'm giving it 3 stars because maybe it will see some play, but I don't think it's gonna be a super popular pick. Next one is gonna be a 7 drop with 7 might, Dire Wing. It's a dragon. I enter ready if you control another dragon. Now, I'm just giving it a 1 star. It's expensive. It doesn't do anything when it enters the game unless you control another dragon. That's not gonna be like, you know, it's not easy to always have a unit on board. If this would count like your legend, that would be a completely different conversation, but it doesn't. You need to have a unit that is a dragon, unless the rules will change in the future. But for now, this is a 1 star that we're not gonna see any play. Now we have a 3 drop with 3 might, Laurent Bladekeeper with ganking. Yeah, well, great. Well, it's good stuff. Okay, I don't want to waste time on him. 1 star, and it's a free drop. I hate free drops. Here we have a 2 drop with 2 might, Sea Monkey. You may pay 1 as an additional cost to play me. When you play me, if you pay the additional cost, buff me. Again, an okay-ish card. We're gonna take set as an example. If you want to play this in a set, it's like is it better than the other 2 drops? One of the other 2 drops give you a possibility of buffing another creature. The other 2 drop is 1 might and gets buffed if you play a creature, right? So this one is like complete reversal of all of those options, and I think that's okay. You have on rate 2 drop, and that has an option to be a 3 drop, and later, like, you can squeeze in it more in turns. Always more options. It's better than worse, right? So you probably will play it you probably will play it in set to some degree, maybe even as a free drop. I will have to think about it more, but I don't think this is a bad card. We're just giving it 3 stars. All right, now we have Veteran Poro, a 2 drop with 2 might and a Weapon Master built in. I'm giving it 3 stars. I don't like it, but it's a 2 drop with 2 might, so it's like, it's okay. it can always be played as a blank, right? Which is not terrible. So you keep the tempo. But then Veteran Pro is actually quite more valuable when you draw it later, if of course your deck is about weapons and equipment. So in a Jax deck, I don't know how much value you will get there, because you already have kind of like a way of going around equipping equipment without losing power but playing mana. So he's gonna be more important into decks that don't have that option, that are not Jax, right, but a body. Like, would you play any gear in like a set or like a Lee Sin deck? If yes, then probably Veteran Poro is gonna be a 2-drop that you're gonna consider. In Jax, I don't think you're gonna have the option to play this, because you're gonna have other 2-drops that you would prefer, that will have a little bit different like agenda, but it's not a terrible card. We're gonna give it 3 stars. Next, we have a 4-drop with 4 might, Yordle Explorer. When you play a card with power cost of 2 or more, draw 1 card. Now this is probably gonna be a card for Sivir and for Fiora. For Fiora, because you just need to buff it once to be into the might area, and then when it's in the might area, you get to ramp. And when you get to ramp, you cannot mitigate the cost of its effect, because it has a synergy with the 2 power cost. So there's a little bit of like an overlap in what you want to achieve. So I don't think this is bad. And it also doesn't cost a power to play the card itself, because then it will be terrible. So I think this is an okay card. And for Sivir, you kind of want to like keep on going with the gold counters that you're getting back to back, right? When you play the Yordle Explorer, you play the power cards, you draw more cards, then you have gold that you will be able to use next turn, and that power is going to be used from the gold, then you get more gold. It's like you're able to like make a engine out of this, I think. So that's pretty neat. But we're gonna give it still 3 stars, because it's probably gonna only see play in that one particular deck, but we'll see. Next one is gonna be a 4-drop Yordle Explorer with 4 might. When you play a card with power cost of 2 or more, draw 1 card. Now I'm giving it 3 star, because I think this is gonna be only playing in 2 archetypes, if even will be played in those archetypes, and that's gonna be Fiora, because it's a 4 might drop that if you get a buff on it, then it becomes mighty and you'll be able to ramp. And then the other one, and it also gonna mitigate all the mighty creatures in the future, right? And then the other archetype that I think this could be played in is gonna be Sivir, because you mitigate the emptying of your hand after you pay the power cost, where there's a synergy with Sivir when you get more gold to play more power cards, so you're able to refill your hand in that type of deck. But now the problem is it doesn't create an engine, because Sivir only works when you recycle runes and not when you like just add power from gold. That would probably be too good. But anyway, I think it's okayish, and if those 2 decks will want to try some kind of engines, that is probably the reason why that might work. So 3 stars, not terrible. Next, we have a Fair Dragon, 7-drop with 1 power cost and 7 might. When you play me, buff up to 4 friendly units. When you spend a buff, play a gold gear token exhausted. I'm giving it 3 stars. I'll be honest with you. This, I already was speaking about like a potential body token deck in some of the previous videos, can't remember which one. But if that's gonna be a deck, that is probably a high-end drop that you would like to play, because giving buff to 4 friendly units, that sounds pretty powerful. The problem is, if those units are actual cards, that means that you're winning. You know what I mean? It's like you probably already win the game so much that this card will not matter that much, because it's gonna be a win more, right? But in a deck that creates creatures out of tokens, so you just go wide because you're able to do that by default, then this card becomes pretty decent. To even pretty strong. But now the problem is that you need to have an archetype like that, so we'll see if that will happen. For now, I'm giving it a 3-star rating. Maybe that will change in the future. The dragon keyword probably doesn't matter for the next 2 expansions, but yeah, it's very limited in its interaction, but it's 7-on-7, and it gives you some form of a small engine with the gold generation. So yeah. Next, we have Jewelfish, a 7-drop with 6 might and 2 power cost. Has also built-in accelerate, which would put it to 3 power cost. I cast 2 resources less for each of your mighty units. Now, I'm giving it a 1 star, and there's a chance I'm gonna be wrong, because I just feel like it's so hard to set this up unless those mighty units are becoming mighty because of one of the spells that we're gonna be reviewing later in this video. But the thing is, again, this kind of sounds like a win more card. If you want this to be a 5-drop 6 might, you still have to pay 2 power, right? That doesn't sound great. If you want to have it as a 3-drop with 6 might and 2 power, that sounds better. But for that, you need 2 mighty units at the time. If you have 2 mighty units on the board, that sounds like you're doing great already. Why would you need this then, right? Like, there are probably better options that are not limited when it comes to like the way of fitting the curve because of its enormous cost and synergy. So there is some, of course, like some possibilities. Like, for example, if you play a Grand Stratagem deck, right? And you just play Grand Stratagem, and you can then play this guy for 0 in a deck that plays tokens. So again, a deck that would play Fey Dragon would also probably play Jawfish, but they're both like 7 drops. That's all of your end game, right? But then you have to play Grand Stratagem to drop a Jawfish the same turn. But if you play Grand Stratagem, aren't you already winning the game, right? Or are you just securing the game because you play Jawfish? Some questions need to be asked here. I'm giving it 1 star because I don't think this is going to be played, even in a deck that plays on the tokens with Grand Stratagem. But maybe I'm wrong. But it would be a cool deck though, right? So we'll see. Now we have a 6 mana, 5 might Ruin Runner. I can't be chosen by enemy spells and abilities. Now I'm giving this 5 stars because I have PTSD from playing World of Warcraft TCG. The cards that could have been targeted in that game were a nightmare to deal with. And in that card game, it was actually easier to attack them than in this game. So this one seems particularly strong for me. And thank God it's actually having 5 might and not 6. So yeah, I think this is pretty strong. The ability to just not be removable that easy. It's like a super heavy deflect, essentially, right? Your opponent just doesn't have options. And this can be, of course, played around with like Call Week and stuff like that. But this is a very decent card. It maybe will be main deckable by a lot of body decks, but it's definitely going to be in the sideboards in the matchups when you know they're going to play against a heavy removal deck. So 5 stars by me for this. Maybe, depending on the metagame, this can be even a 6 star, but for now I'm giving it 5. Next one is Akshan, 4-drop with 4 might, so on rate, and it has built-in Weapon Master. Now I like the Weapon Master on 4 drops because that means that you can play first, play a equipment on turn 1, and immediately on turn 2, when your opponent has limited amount of ways of interacting with your gear, right? Because it was his first turn, you immediately can equip it. So this is pretty neat. This guy can be pretty big already off the gate, but it also has an additional effect. You may pay 2 power as an additional cost to play me. When you play me, if you pay the additional cost, move an enemy gear to your base. You control it until I leave the board. If it's an equipment, attach it to me. That is just great. Like, it of course might be not useful in a lot of matchups, and this card then becomes a little bit worse, but at the same time, I feel like the gold generation will be something that most decks will try to do to some degree. And in this case, you can just always get that from them for paying 2 power, of course, right? But then you deny them 1 power and this will cost you 1 power. So you have to just calculate what is going to be more important, keeping me a little bit lower on tempo, but denying the tempo to my opponent, right? That's probably be a yes in most cases when you play a body deck. So I think this is pretty decent, and if your opponent is of course playing equipment, then this guy is incredible. So yeah, pretty good card, I would say. Might not be main deck unless you play a lot of equipments yourself, but then this is gonna be a strong sideboard card against specific archetypes that plays equipment, right? So yeah, I like it. Then we have a 3-drop Fiora with 1 power cost and 3 might. When I attack or defend 1-on-1, double my might this combat. Now, when we got first the spoiler of this card in Chinese, everyone thought it's just like, if I attack or defend alone, double my strength. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I was like, that's not possible. And it's not. It actually requires your opponent to also have 1 creature, which is harder to do. It's still a strong card, but it's limited in its possible interactions, right? So depending on what kind of deck you're playing, I feel like this card in combination with purple, with chaos, is gonna be pretty strong because you're gonna be able to move on the battlefield. If there are 2 units, you might just like, you know, whoop, one of the guys from the battlefield with some kind of spell from the purple, and then you have a 1/1, for example. So then Fiora suddenly is a 6 might. And remember, if you buff it in with something before she starts attacking or defending, that buff also gets buffed twice. So she becomes very big, very fast, but again, your opponent can mitigate this by playing around it. And you have to then play around the way that your opponent plays around. So I'm giving it a very conservative 3-star rating, but I might be slapped with some comments over here saying I'm an idiot. And I'm ready for that, because you guys know this video is for entertainment values, but I'm gonna be revisiting at the end of the metagame how wrong was I, and I feel like this might be one of those. Cut of the Arm, a 4-drop with 1 power cost and 3 might, and I gave it 4 stars, which is like, you know, I gave the Fiora 3. So why am I rating this card a little bit higher than the Fiora? First and foremost, this card requires a errata. Like there's no way this stays in this way. So it has built-in deflect, that's fine, but it has the text: when I move to a battlefield, give a friendly unit my keywords and +1 might equal to my might this turn. This guy has, like, when he moves to battlefield, he would target himself and give himself another deflect, so it's deflect 2 now, and it has 6 might. If that would work that way with an errata, this guy is insta 6 stars. Like, he's just broken, right? But there's no way this is gonna work this way, so I'm giving it 4 stars because I still think there's a lot of utility over here. So now let me explain this way. If we attack with this guy and we play with any other units, right, we might actually even go into that direction of the tokens, what I'm speaking of before in other cards, right? When it comes to the bodied archetypes, you're capable of essentially changing this guy in a potential copy of a spell. And what I mean by that, if we, let's say we play any kind of a buff, we play any kind of equipment, and all of that might gets doubled if we just have another creature, and it can be a token, right? It doesn't have to be a card that we played in the previous turn or something. So it doesn't even have to get like an accelerate. There might be like a challenge combo as well for the other creature, because that other creature doesn't have to be on your battlefield. So there's like a lot of possibilities here. And think about it this way: there's a card in this expansion that gives +5 might. That is like for 1 resource. If you have 2 units that can attack, that is +10 might in just 1 attack. It's kinda crazy. So I'm giving it 4 stars. I think it's very conservative. There's a very high chance this guy is gonna be very played, but I really like him. It's a very cool design, and I didn't even speak about the keywords, because he gives all the other cards the deflect, right? But if he has any other keyword, he gives that keyword too. So depending on what kind of equipment would you give him, that keyword from the equipment can also get copied. So there's like a lot of there's a lot to take in. And this guy, I think I'm gonna make an entire video just about this guy and how we can build a deck around him, because he's very cool. And now we have a Lucian. Now I'm giving him 5 stars. It's a 3-drop with 3 might and a weapon master built in. The first time I concur each turn, ready me. Now, I think this guy is fantastic. So first, he can be a champion unit in the Lucian deck, which means you might actually consider playing a Lucian as a second player like every time, because you can just insta drop him, right? You start the game, you have 3 resources, you play Lucian, right? And he will concur most likely because he's 3 might. He gets ready, he can go back to base, for example. That's already pretty decent option. And then he has a weapon master built in. Now think about it this way: if you go second and you play a purple deck, then it can be Lucian, of course, right? There are boots that give you ganking, which means that you can play the boots on turn 1 because they have 3-drop. Then on turn 2, you can play this guy, Ride the Wind, go into a location, he gets readied because he conquers, and then he can gank the other location, gets ready because he conquers, and goes back to base. That is pretty fucking nuts. So, yeah, this guy is gonna be very oppressive if played like correctly and you draw the nuts. But it's also on rate, which is great, and has 2 upsides. So there's no way this is a bad card. And he also looks cool. So yeah, 5 stars by me. And also remember, in a Lucian deck, if you go first, you play a 2-drop equipment on round 1. Then you go into the turn 2 with 4 resources. You can play Lucian, equip that equipment from round 1. So let's say it's a +2 might, for example. He becomes a 5 might on turn 2. And you go Showstopper, go to location, untap him, go back. Like, there's a lot there. Now we have Yone, a 5-drop, 5 might with 1 power cost, Weapon Master built in. When I conquer an open battlefield, deal damage equal to my might to an enemy unit in the base. There's a lot of going on in this card, but I don't think it's gonna be easy to pull off. So I'm giving him a 2-star. Like, he's not terrible. The Weapon Master built in kind of mitigates the power cost that you have in him, but then he kind of needs to be played in an equipment deck. I don't know how often will that be. I don't know. We'll see what is the meta game, right? But also, this guy is essentially blank if he attacks not an open battlefield, and he's also essentially blank if the opponent doesn't have a unit in the base. So there's like a lot of scenarios where this guy is just not really great, and I think that's a problem. That's why I'm putting him at a 2-star. Now we have Jax Unrelenting, the 4-drop 3 might with 1 power cost, so not really great so far. Has a built-in Weapon Master, that's okay. When you attach an equipment to me, you may pay 1 to draw 1. So essentially, you can think about it this way, that every single one of your equipment has an additional equip cost, but that draws you a card. How good that is, you have to think about yourself, like in how many matchups you have spare mana to draw cards, right? And the answer is probably not too many. So this guy's probably going to be a sideboard card when you want to exchange it for the different Jacks that you will have at your champion unit, the green one, right? That is a little bit more aggressive, better statted. And you want to play this guy in the slower matchups against some more control-based decks that will try to remove your creatures, and you have to keep up with the card advantage. So there is some applications to him. That's why I'm not giving him, like, you know, lower rate, but I don't think he's gonna be the main choice for the deck. So yeah, 3 stars by me. There's gonna be a lot to talk about this one. Severe Ambitious. She is a 6 cost, 3 power, 7 might. So that's it's an incredibly expensive card. But remember, if you play Severe, then she kind of recuperates the cost with getting cold, right? But that's only in Severe. And I don't think this is going to be only played in Severe. Deflect 2, which is incredibly like hard now to remove because it sets up the tempo of the opponent so back, right? With 7 might, you probably will have to use 2 spells to remove this, which is 4 power and an additional cost to the spells that you play. And the text says, when I concur after an attack, if you assign 5 or more excess damage to enemy units, you may deal that much to an enemy unit. Now, this will not work on an open battlefield, right? But the problem is also it doesn't have an accelerate, and this card definitely is fantastic when you can catch an opponent off guard and deal that assigned 5 damage, right? Because it can deal to a unit anywhere in the game. So it can be a unit in the base, can be in the different battlefield. There's a lot of like possible ways of outplaying your opponent, but it has to be 5 or more excess damage, which means if she is at 7, she needs to attack something with a 2 might to deal that excess damage. How often does that happen? We don't know. It's gonna be late in the game, so probably not that often, right? She also benefits from spells like Showstopper when she's essentially a 7-drop that can instantly attack for 8. And then if you can actually benefit from catching an opponent off guard like this, suddenly she's completely swinging the game. So I'm giving her 5 stars. She's incredibly expensive, but very sticky. And because of that, I think the free power cost is something that you can just straight up eat. And also remember, if you play a set deck, not only this card is hard to remove with the spells, but also it's hard to remove because if she's buffed, then she just gets resurrected, right? So I feel like it's pretty strong card, and it's like one of those cards when you just feel like you're gonna flip the board. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this. Maybe I have to eat my words, but on paper she seems awesome. And again, remember, there's a spell in this expansion that buffs by 5 for a minimal cost, and then that excess damage is very easily triggered. And speaking of, we are having here Punch First. It's a 1 resource 2 power spell, an action that gives a +5 might this turn. Thank God it's not a reaction, by the way, but it's still a 6 stars for me. It's a common that will define the body decks, because now your opponents have to think about, you have 1 open or no. What if this creature suddenly gets +5? He will lose a lot of tempo. He will be on the back foot because the resources are just gonna be like, you know, pulled away so hard. But suddenly every creature is a threat. That is, I don't know, man. Like this feels like oppressive, and I didn't play once against this card. So 6 stars. It's meta defining. There's no other way. Like this card is just incredible. And as I said, it will make it so much easier to trigger like the trample effects, like the one that we had just here on Sivir, right? And it doesn't matter if you just put yourself back 5 resources back. It doesn't matter. Like, you get a clean board because you assign the damage that is such an excess, and you just kill an enemy unit. Like 2-for-1ing, 2-for-2, but you clean up the board, and then you get to play some units, smaller units in the upcoming turn. That's fine. Like, yeah, this is a big swing. Now we have Show of Strength, a 2-resource spell with 1 power cost, reaction, draw 1 for each of your mighty units. I don't know, man. This doesn't sound good. It costs even power. The only deck that I would see again this being used, it's a token deck with Grand Stratagem that just suddenly draws 5 cards. But then you have to squeeze 1 turn with Grand Stratagem and this at the same time, which will pull you back for 4 power cost. And also it's 8 resources. I don't know. It's maybe, but then in any other normal deck that doesn't have like a lot of tokens with Grand Stratagem, you're probably already winning the game if you draw more than 2 with this. If you draw 2, you're already pretty ahead on the board, most likely. So yeah, I don't like this. Another spell for 3 resources and 1 power cost, Strike Down. Choose an equipped friendly unit, so it needs to have an equipment. It deals damage equal to its might to an enemy unit, then detach an equipment from it. This is a straight up 1-star. There's too much going on to actually get a value out of this. You need a equipment that is then equipped, so you probably would like to have a weapon master on it as well, and then you have to detach the equipment, and then you have to attach the equipment again to get value out of it. Oh man, there's too much work. Too much work. 1-star. Now we have Here to Help, 2 resources, 1 power, hidden, action. I mean, it's reaction if it's hidden, of course. You may play a unit from your hand into a battlefield you control, reducing its cost by 3. Now I'm giving it 2 stars. There was a lot of chatter like, oh, why do we play Brunhilde, or whatever her name is, the 6-drop red one that doesn't allow opponents to play cards. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool, but then your opponent will always play around it, so probably will not change much. I feel like if you want to play hidden cards, you have to play more than 1, right? 1 type at least, so there has to be some bluff aspect. And if you play bluff aspect, that means you probably play more spells. If you play more spells, Here to Help is not gonna be that impactful because there's a high chance you don't have a creature in your hand, or there's limited access to different creatures that are gonna be more expensive. So I feel like this is not gonna be as strong as people think. So I'm giving it 2 stars, maybe very niche. Maybe also some combo type of deck will arise at some point, but it's not gonna be this expansion anyway. I'm not gonna spend too much time theorycrafting this card because I feel like it's just not worth it. So yeah, giving it 2 star. This is probably gonna be clipped in the future when this breaks the game. Now we have Marching Orders for 3 resources. Action. Repeat 3. Remember, you can only repeat 1 time. Choose a friendly unit anywhere and an enemy unit at a battlefield. They deal damage equal to their mights to each other. So it's like a challenge, but for more. And you can choose it twice. Yeah, this is a 1-star for me. So the problem with this card is that it only targets battlefield. Challenge doesn't. Challenge can kill units in the base, right? And then the other thing is, if you repeat it, you probably don't want to repeat it on the same unit that you did it the first time, because then your unit probably will die because you don't heal until the cleanup phase of a combat or end of the turn. And if you play this twice on the same unit, then yeah, you just exchange it 2 for 2 because you have to play the Marching Orders. Those units have to be on battlefield. Like this. Not a fan. Not a fan at all. I know you can target like with 2 creatures that you have, but then it's like, again, it has to be on battlefields. There's too many things that have to align to make this card really good. So I'm just giving it 1 star. It's challenge all the way anyway. And now we go into equipment. 2 mana, Doran's Blade. Equip for 1 power, it just gives +2 might. I'm giving it 4 stars. Whoa, 4 stars for a blank card. Oh no. I'm giving it only a 4-star review because it's a 2-drop equipment that can be used by cards like Lucian, for example, or any other like weapon masters to immediately essentially get the buff, and then can be reused for the same purpose in the future. So if I see equipment being played in the metagame, it's gonna be most likely equipment like this. That's at least my opinion. So I'm giving it 4 stars because if there is a metagame where those cards are played, those cards are good. Now we have just essentially a different Doran's Blade. It's also 2 resources, Hex Drinker, but instead of giving +2 might, it gives a deflect. Now again, if we have a deck that works with 2 drops equipments, and benefits from that. This is gonna be a sideboard choice when it's gonna be a sideboard choice, it works perfectly with what you want to achieve it, right? Because again, let's keep using the Lucian as an example, the 3-drop Weapon Master, right? So you play Hex Drinker, then you go turn 2, you play Lucian, equip the Hex Drinker to him, so he's suddenly 4 might. If you played Lucian Legend, then he has also +1 assault. He's gonna be able to go back to base after conquering. If you played a Showstopper to do it instantly on turn 2, then it has 6 might because he also has a buff. And suddenly, this guy is also hard to remove because of the deflect cost. But then even if you remove the Lucian, there's still the Hex Drinker that will be going to be equipped to another card, and then another card gets hard to remove. So I feel like this might be even better than the Doran's Blade, depending on the meta game. But I think if you have an equipment deck that plays around those creatures that with Weapon Masters and like quick movement and so on, this is very good. Now we have a gear with 1-star review. 2-cost Petricide Monument. Temporary, so it works till the beginning of your next phase. Frenzy unit have deflect. Now, why do I not like this? If I want to save my units, I'm gonna use it in body. I'm probably gonna use Unyielding Spirit instead, right? Because it works on all of the projectiles that deal damage. This works, semi-works, on straight up removal, right? Because then they have to pay the deflect cost, but it doesn't save my unit. It just makes it more tempo, like punishing for my opponents, which is not great, right? So I don't like this. I don't know if I would ever want to sacrifice my my slots on something like this, and it only works for 1 turn. So yeah, not a fan. There are other options in the deck that probably will be better on what they do. It's like straight up having more might. It's probably better than this. So yeah, and unless of course token generation deck in body, and then all those units have like a deflect. Maybe that's a thing. That sounds very bad. Anyway, 1-star. Now we have Warmog's Armor, another equipment, very basic one with 4 stars review. 1 cost, equip power 1. When I conquer, buff me, +1 might. And also, it gives +1 might by default. So we can compare it to Doran's Blade. Doran's Blade gives +1 might by default, and this one is for 1 cost instead of 2, right? So it is half of what Doran's Blade does, but then it has an upside of doing exactly what Doran's Blade does, with the upside of also giving a buff, which has a synergy with Set, for example. So having it for 1 resource also means it's easier to squeeze in rather than just drop it on turn 1 for a deck with the Weapon Masters, and also has synergy with Azir, because then you can play a Sand Soldier if you played Warmog's Armor on turn 1 as well. So I feel like this is pretty decent. Again, it requires you to have a deck that is playing with the equipment. I don't know if equipment decks will actually be a thing. If my experience from other card games tell me anything, probably not. Because if there will be a meta game where the equipment is valuable and meta defining, the format is gonna get solved really quick, because people just start hating on them, and then those equipments just get instant destroyed. We already have a very strong card against equipment decks, which is the Thermo Beam in red, that just destroys all the gears. So you play like those multiple gears, and then you just get absolutely annihilated by that Thermo Beam. So I'm still giving it a 4-star, because at least it enables one of the archetypes with the Azir, and it's not a bad deck. Not a bad card itself. You can also maybe consider that in a set deck, just like a one-off or something. It's pretty okay, I would say. It's pretty okay. And now we have a rare Trinity Force, a 4-drop that it equips for 1 power. When I hold, score 1 point and gives +2 might. I'm giving it 1 star. I hope I'm not wrong. This just doesn't do much for the cost, and yeah, I mean, it's great stuff. When you hold, you get additional points, but basically from all the body decks that I'm thinking about, that's probably only Set that would really like to use that. Can you use a 4-drop that only gives +2 might? Probably not. It's very expensive in a deck that doesn't play with a lot of resources, but it does stay on the board even if a unit gets deleted. So I'm giving it 1-star review because it's just not on rate, but it does have a small win condition built in, so maybe then I'm super duper wrong. I hope not, because I don't like this effect to be in the game, to be honest. I really don't. Like, it's like an additional like tempo boost. Yeah. Bleh. And oh boy, we have a card. Ancient Henge, a gear for 2 resources, 1 power. It's like the opposite of the Hextech anomaly. So for tapping it in a reaction, you can pay any amount of energy to swap that energy essentially to power, right? So in Hextech anomaly, you change the power into energy, so you can just drop more cards. This one here just changes your energy into potential power cost. Right now, the obvious synergy with that is bullet time. So you're capable of just using bullet time without putting yourself at a huge disadvantage tempo-wise, so you can keep building up your Rama and ramping up, which is great. It's a 2-card combo though, and it leaves gear on the board, which is both a downside and an upside because it can be hated, but also you can build up this combo over time. So for now, I feel like this is not gonna be shining too much, but I already want to give it a 5-star review because there's for sure at some point in the game a lot of possibilities to be done with this. There's no way this card is bad, and I think it's pretty strong overall, like even if it's not going to be instantly used in any particular decks. But as it's the same with the Hextech anomaly, although the Hextech anomaly I feel like it can be just dropped by default because it just combos with every single unit in the game. You drop more units, that's great. You pay your tempo and you get more board control. That is fantastic. This one is the opposing of it, so it requires more, let's say, thought process and specific cards that will benefit from the additional power, and that's currently bullet time and maybe something else that I can't really think of right now, but it's definitely gonna be a playable card in the future. And the last card in the body set is gonna be Bone Shiver, 3-drop that has a very expensive equip for 1 mana and a power cost. It gives +2 might, and when I concur, channel 1 rune exhausted. So it's a persistent ramp effect. Now, there's a high chance I'm very wrong about this, but I do like it because I'm giving it 5 stars, and I like it because it's a 3-drop that doesn't require you power. So if you go second, dropping this first, and then using something to instantly attack the turn after, sounds like a sweet deal, right? Again, we're gonna use the Lucian as an example. We go second, we start with the Bone Shiver, then on 5 resources, we will play Lucian and he gets it equipped, so he's at 5 might, right? Then you play Showstopper, he gets to 6 might. You pay 1 power cost for the Showstopper. You go into our location, you concur the location. It doesn't have to have a unit or anything, so you get your resource back, and your unit now suddenly is untapped, and you can go back to your base and do the same next turn and ramp up again. This fixes a lot of problems with like the power cost of those decks when it comes to body, but it does require you to go second to fully, let's say, have the ability to exploit the Weapon Master's keyword with this. But I think there's I feel like this might be very good, but we'll end up seeing how often will this happen and how much of a benefit in the long term ramping up in a body deck would actually benefit. Because what do you play more end game? You can't really build around that because like it's hard to ramp with just the weapon, and you probably will not play any other ramping cards alongside it, right? Because you just need more units to use the equipment, so you don't have enough slots in a deck to squeeze everything in. But this just basically serves a double purpose as a ramp spell and a buff at the same time, and the expensive equip cost doesn't really matter if you play Weapon Masters. Now, do I think that it's gonna be like Lucian is probably gonna be played outside of Lucian Legend as well, but then you have to draw both. But I feel like there is something to it, I think, and I'm gonna try to build a deck with the Bone Shiver in mind, and we'll see how that goes. But for now, I'm giving it a very optimistic 5-star review, but I think it's just a cool card as well, and the artwork is great. So again, to summarize what we showed at the beginning of the video: 8 trash cards, 2 niche cards, 9 okayish cards, 4 good cards, 6 awesome cards, and 1 meta defining card. Like, it's definitely a good expansion for body. I feel like there's a lot of cards that can be built around, and a lot of cards that are just straight up awesome and just cool to play with. Like, the power fantasy will be very high, which is a theme that I like about Riftbound. You get to do cool stuff. So yeah, I like the body portion of this expansion. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.